Hello, everybody. Getting started in just a minute. All right. So, welcome to Creating an Inclusive Climate for a Thriving Workplace Culture. My name is John Little. I'm the founder and owner of the Winner's Edge Coaching. And this is a course that I developed about a year or so ago to really help organizations to focus on creating that inclusive culture that's for many organizations. Give me one. There we go. I had a little bit of an echo there. Sorry about that. I don't want to mispronounce your name, Olabicola, and I apologize if I mispronounced it. But thank you for joining us here in the chat on LinkedIn. So I'm going to take some time and go through just a bit of an overview of the course itself, and then get into the course and demo some of the key areas for you. So this course is it's a virtual self-paced course. It's 6 modules that is really designed for those mid-level leaders in your organization. So really kind of like from your management tier up to maybe your managing directors, your senior directors, somewhere in that tier, however you kind of have your organization structured. That's really what this course is designed to address, mainly for the reason that it's been shown and documented and talked about that really these initiatives around culture, around inclusive cultures, around DEI, they really live and die at that middle management level. So that's why I want to focus the attention and focus the efforts on for this course. Because that's what's going to really drive that culture. Now, of course, your leaders need to be bought in, your C-suite leaders need to be on board and supporting this, and it needs to be something that really connects with both your learning strategies as well as your DEI strategies within your organization. So let's go ahead and move into the overview a little bit. So the course is built out in 6 different modules, and I'm going to go through each one of those modules here in just a few minutes. And really, the goal of those modules is to really give you those key areas of focus for your leaders to be paying attention to, with the ultimate goal of creating processes internally, creating ways that you can measure specific things that they can do to help to build that inclusive culture, which then leads to that thriving workplace that we're all looking for. And it's a self-paced experience, so it's something that people will go through kind of on their own time. A couple of different delivery models that we can talk about on how we'll actually deliver the course, but it is built out as a virtual self-place module that interfaces with all of your LMS systems that you have. So again, I talked about the target audience for this course is really for that middle tier of leaders within organizations, because that's where the big work gets done. And so one of the things that's built as part of this course, and you'll see it when we get into the course demo itself, is there's a process that we walk them through. There's a process that the course walks individuals through that helps them at the end start to build something out for their teams that they can really lean on. It's called a charter document for your teams around an inclusive culture. So more on that when we get into the course itself. So how long does this course take? So it's really designed to take about 15 to 20 minutes per module. So I mentioned that there are 6 modules that are part of the course. So you're really looking at a total of about 90 to 120 minutes of individual learning for this course. Now, that is just the course itself. As I mentioned, there are a couple of different options, right? So one of the options that exist is to do some facilitated sessions in between some of the different module groupings. So that's something that I would work on with you as an organization, either to facilitate them myself or to do some train the trainer. So that way you have the opportunity to kind of keep this paced in-house however you want to, or it can be a standalone model. It really is up to your preference, and I'm more than happy to discuss those options with you. So what are the main course benefits? Like, why is this something that is important for you as an organization to focus on? The biggest one is that those cultures, those climates of inclusion, where people feel as though they can be their full and complete selves. They feel as though they can bring their entire self to work, their entire self to the organization, their entire self to the work that they're doing. That way they can be fully engaged. And when they're engaged, then that helps that climate thrive within an organization. So we're looking at increasing employee engagement. We're looking at increasing things like collaboration, things like innovation, things like partnerships, things like, all of the things that will lead to greater and better outputs, greater and better results, greater and better productivity, because all of those things really tie in together. There's a formula or code that I talk about in the work that I do. And I even have t-shirts that kind of spell this out. They say, crack the code, I plus E equals R. And what that means is inclusion plus engagement equals results. And so when we get into the course, you'll see kind of how that works and how it all really kind of ties together. So the decision makers, right? That's part of this webinar that I'm doing. Part of this session is to really start to talk with individuals within organizations who are making decisions on how are we going to really focus on building out inclusive leaders at our organization. And so I'm really looking for, those decision makers, and either those CHRO, the chief HR officer, the chief diversity officer, chief learning officer, those type of roles that can make these decisions for organizations, or can influence the decisions, or maybe individuals who have influence with those, who can make those decisions at the organization. And really what that does for you, because, we know, what's the WIFM, what's in it for me. What it really does for you is it gives you an opportunity to bring something unique to your organization that's going to elevate your DEI strategies. Not to say that what you're doing is wrong or anything like that. This is just a supplement to elevate those DEI strategies and to give some laser focused inclusive leadership training to those who are on your teams, and those leaders that are really trying to figure out or really struggling with, like, how do I implement this? How do I actually do this? How do I actually focus on inclusive behaviors in the midst of my day-to-day work? Or what does it even mean? Because for a lot of people, like, they're still trying to figure out, like, what is inclusion? What does inclusive culture actually mean? What's that look like? So from that CHRO, from that CDO, from that CLO lens, if you can bring that to your organization, that's going to be a really, really strong feather in your cap. And then the course implementation. This is the last slide before I actually get into the content of the course itself. But it's available in SCORM and HTML formats. So it should interface pretty seamlessly with any of your existing LMS platforms. And if not, then we can work with my curriculum designer to make sure that it's in a platform or in a format that will work with what you need for your LMS. And it's ready to go. It's already packaged and set. There are some things that we can do if you would like. There are some customizations that we can do, and I'll talk about some of those. One of the customizations is the branding. Right now, it's branded with my company, just from the standpoint of, it's something that I own, and I don't really want it to get out there unless I'm the one who's just part of that process. But if you want to brand it to your organization, or if you just kind of want to completely, blank brand it, those are things that we can do as well. More than happy to help that process happen and go along. So let me switch screens and let me go into the actual course itself. So let me go ahead and close out that screen. I'm going to switch over to a different screen. Give me just 1 second here as I switch to the screen that actually has the course itself. So, all right, here we go. So we're going to start with module 1, right? So with module 1, I'm going to show you the first part of it. And this is how all the modules will look. It is, again, it's all kind of web-based. So it's something that's available online. for your team members. So module one, I'm just going to show you the narrated portion of module one for the sake of just kind of demonstrating that piece of it. However, just know that it's available with all of the modules narrated, or it's available in a format that is with no sound. All of the modules, however, do have transcripts that are available for each individual slide. So let's go into first the influence of culture. And again, I'm just going to play this so that way you can hear the narration. I'll hop through a few different ones here in module one. For the rest of the modules, I'll just kind of talk through some of the key concepts and key points of the content. So again, just wanted to demonstrate what some of that looks like. So in module number one, we're focusing on the influences that lead to an inclusive culture, and so we talk about mainly the importance of an inclusive culture. And here are all of the areas that we go into. We talk about the qualities of inclusive climates, and also one of the things that we will do is we have knowledge checks that are built in throughout the module. So I'm just going to pause and show you this one again. This one's going to be narrated just so you can hear it. Now, in the live module, you would actually have to go through and select the ones that would be the correct answers. If it's incorrect, it would give you an option to go back and redo it. And if it's correct, it gives you a little bit of information as to why it's correct. Then the next part of module one is the 4 steps of creating inclusive climates. And so it really breaks down, like specifically to an inclusive climate, what are the things that you need to be doing as a leader to start to create that, make that into existence. Okay. And then one of the other parts of this, and again, I'm not going to go into each and every content area here, but one of the most important parts of this course, one of the things that's built into it, are these reflection exercises. So there are reflection exercises in each of the modules. The reason that that's built in there is for 2 reasons. One, we wanted to be looking at, and as an individual who's taking the course, we want to make sure that you're connecting with the content, that you're really understanding the things that the content is trying to teach you. But also, as an individual leader, we want you to start looking internally, because as you start to look internally about how you kind of take this content in, how you apply it to yourself as a leader, and then to your teams, it's important for you to be able to have this time to reflect. And the other part of it is, from these reflection exercises, this is what's going to build out your capstone activity at the end. So for module one, we have a reflection exercise. Now, this is one of the areas that is customizable. Okay. So these are some general inclusive leadership principles. If you have specific leadership principles internally that you would want to map inclusion to, we can always go ahead and just make quick change on that. And then that will reflect on our capstone activity as well. Now, in each module, the users are going to be prompted to make sure that they're saving this information so that when they get to the capstone activity, then they'll have all the information. And this is what that looks like. All right, so that is module one. So I'm going to hop over to module two, and module two are leadership actions that encourage an inclusive climate. So again, our headings here: demonstrating a commitment to inclusion, making your viewpoint easy to understand, and observing and addressing team behavior. So from here, again, I'm just going to go through a couple of content areas, just some highlights that I want to show you and share with you. So with this module, this is really talking about that ownership that leaders will have around inclusion, around inclusive behaviors. And it starts really with this one, holding yourself accountable for including for those inclusion standards before you expect others to do them. Now, for the non-narrated modules, if somebody were to choose to do the non-narrated, the transcript is available. And this can be used if you want to take this in-house and you want to use these as facilitated sessions. The transcripts are available for a facilitator to go through and build off of the transcripts that would have been part of the narrated module. All right. So again, that's demonstrating a commitment. Again, I'm just going to show you a couple of the content areas, making your viewpoint easy to understand. And again, for a lot of leaders, they struggle with this. They feel they don't really know how to communicate what their intentions may be. So, this is part of showing that inclusive behaviors matter, and then giving some specifics to what those commitments may look like. And so, again, these are some of the features of the courses it's built out. As you click on the different individual boxes here, it's really going to build out and spell out for leaders how they can make that commitment visible by prioritizing, by integrating into everyday work, by avoiding things like preferential treatment and having favorites, and by showing interest in getting to know your team members as people and not just someone who's there to do a job. All of these are little things, but as they're laid out and spelled out for leaders, it really helps them to understand what they can be doing as an individual to really start to build out those cultures of inclusion. And then another part of it is observing and addressing team behavior, right? Because just because a leader is getting this information, just because a leader may have inclusive goals and ambitions and principles and really want that culture to exist, they may not necessarily have that in their team yet. And so part of this is being able to observe the team's behavior. So this is one of the things that leaders can do. And again, you see there's a number of things that are going to be spelled out for leaders to do. This is a really instructive course. So people are going to really kind of walk away with tangible things that they can do. So this is something for a leader to do, or for a leader to lean into someone else in the team and the organization to do, where they're going to observe that team behavior. And then there's some questions, right, that we want the leaders to be thinking about as it relates to those leadership actions that encourage that inclusive culture. And these are things that they can really start to observe. Again, a big part of this is opening up leaders' minds to get them to start thinking about, understanding, kind of figuring out, like, what are some of the things that are happening at the organization that I need to be mindful of as a leader? What are some of the things that I need to be aware of? And what are some of the things that I actually have influence on that I can contribute to making a difference? Okay. So part of this one also there are a couple of scenarios here for the individual leaders to process and to think about. And there's no right or wrong answer. So if somebody writes their answer in here, this is really for them to reflect on and think about, how would I address these situations as a leader? Okay. And again, reflection exercises on this one. Individual actions for the leader. So again, putting it back on them. What are some of the things that they would do to create and or sustain that inclusive culture on their team? So those are leadership actions. So that's module 2. Now, as I mentioned, there are some opportunities for some additional learning and some additional facilitation in between modules. And this is one of the things that I offer, is doing some what I call activation sessions. And typically I'll do this after each 2 modules is what I would offer to do that. And that's, different pricing structure, and, be happy to engage with you one-on-one on what that looks like. But that structure or that process is really about taking the things that you've learned in the first 2 modules, or learned in modules 3 and 4, or 1 through 4 up to that point, and like, how do you put those into place? What are some of the things you still have questions about? So those are really kind of group coaching sessions, those activation sessions, that help you to put the pieces together as you start to move forward. All right, so let's look at module 3. Module 3 is looking at what is engagement, because remember, this course is really built around that concept of inclusion plus engagement equals results. So we really start to unpack engagement and what engagement is and what it isn't. So we want to talk about, what are some of the characteristics of engagement? Why is engagement so important? Why is it something that we focus on? And this is not just specific to inclusion. This is overall as an organization. why do we focus on engagement? Why do we have such such attention to it? Because it really, really matters. It's really important. And in addition to engagement and identifying those characteristics, we really start to look at some of the other things that are how you can identify engagement, when you can see it, how, what are the characteristics that really make engagement click. And again, reflection exercises here. How can you tell when you were engaged, right? Because as leaders, we've probably been through a number of different things in our career where there have been times we've been super engaged, but there are also may have been times that we were disengaged, right? So really trying to unpack what are some of those things, what are some of those times, what are some of those periods, and how did we navigate through it at the time? How did we work through when we were engaged or disengaged, and what's that look like? So then we start to tie the differences between engagement and satisfaction, because we don't want those to be confused, right? We don't want organizations to just be thinking about engagement and satisfaction as the same thing. We don't want leaders to think about engagement and satisfaction as the same thing, because they're two completely different concepts altogether. And then we start to talk a little bit here about psychological and behavioral energy, because that's going to really feed into our next module. So as we go into module four is really, again, doubling down on that engagement, conditions that lead to engaged team members, right? So we talk about the role of inclusion as it relates to engagement. So we're starting to tie those binds together. And again, we've talked previously in earlier modules about the importance of inclusion, why we want to focus on it, how do we focus on it, how do we recognize it, how do we start to grow inclusion through our inclusionary culture and climates and our behaviors. Now we start to tie inclusion and engagement together. We start to talk about the role of inclusion, what that looks like, and then these two key states that lead to inclusion, belongingness and valued uniqueness, right? And what those really mean to an individual at an organization. That then takes us into some key areas around psychological meaningfulness, right? Psychological meaningfulness really is why does work mean something to me, right? What's my reason? What's my why? What's my connection to the work, right? And we unpack that through a few different areas. We also talk about psychological safety, right? Psychological safety is something that we are very familiar with. We talk about it a lot, especially over the past few years. It really is this. It's the freedom and safety to engage, to challenge, to feel as though I can be my full, complete, and unique self. But in order for us to have that, we have to have trust. There has to be trust that exists for psychological safety to even start to exist. There has to be a high level of trust between team members and their leaders, between individual team members or employees and the organization. So that trust has to be there. That bond has to exist in order for psychological safety to exist. And then psychological availability, that's that next part of it. The psychological availability is me really being able to be present and to have that capacity to engage with the work that I'm doing, to get the capacity to engage with the work that is required or asked of me. And then again, here in module 4, we have that reflection exercise that's built out. And that main question is like, why is it important for the work that you're doing to be important and worthwhile? And then again, kind of leading the leaders or taking the leaders through these processes to think about the impact of the work if the team didn't value what you do, right? That can be something that leaders can really sit back and reflect on. Like, am I really connecting with my team? Am I really connecting with the individuals in the organization, with the individuals on my team, and also with my leaders and what the organization finds as valuable and important? So that's module 4 right there. So then moving into module 5, right? So module 5 starts to talk about the impact of those shared understandings and goals. And when with this, we're going to really start to talk about the standards and norms that exist within organizations, right? And this is why it's important. We've taken things to this point. We've talked about inclusion. We've talked about engagement. Now let's start to talk about what it looks like in the organization, what it feels like in the organization for your individual team members, and some of the standards and the norms that you want to communicate, with some of the standards and norms you want to establish, and kind of make part of who your organization is. And again, this happens at that middle management, middle level leader tier. That's where a lot of this work has to happen, has to occur. So the standards and norms really help to prevent those teams from having just like those one or two people that are dominating everything. The standards and norms really it helps to bring everything and everybody together through these processes. And the leader has to provide clear guidance in what these standards and norms are going to be. It's not to say that the leader is going to dictate what those terms are, because a lot of times, and this is really where that capstone activity comes into place, a lot of times it's a collaborative effort to determine what are going to be the standards and norms for our team. What are going to be the things that we accept? What are going to be the things that we believe are important? What are going to be the things that we want to create so that way our team can thrive, our team can exist at their best capacity. So our standards and norms a lot of times are how we start to bring all the different perspectives together. Then building out our building trust among our team members, right? I mentioned earlier, trust is so important. Trust is vitally important. So how we start to build that is through establishing shared bonds, right? We take the time to get to know one another. This is where emotional intelligence comes into play. This is where learning the individuals on the team comes into play. This is where those relationships that you build really come into play. And then establishing ground rules for the team, right? So what are the ground rules? Like, our ground rules are ways that we can make sure that our teams are connecting, collaborating, and working together, and working in a positive way. And then we get to inclusive engagement, right? Because this is kind of where one of the places that we've been building up to is inclusive inclusive engagement, those understanding the shared goals and understandings, and then putting together our teams, right? And how we can make sure that our teams are high performing teams, because that's what we want. And that's what happens when you focus on inclusion and engagement, is you get high performing teams, because the individuals that are on the team, they feel comfortable, they feel safe, they feel like they can collaborate, they feel like they can innovate, they feel like they can respectfully challenge when they disagree. All of those things are part of that inclusive climate that you are creating as a leader. And then again, a reflection exercise for a leader, like as a leader, how can I make sure that everybody has a seat at the table that needs to have a seat at the table? How can I make sure that every voice is heard that has something to say? These are some of the things that are really, really important as we start to look at, we're building out our team and our team charter. And so module 6, where it all kind of comes together, is our final module. We look at how leaders impact engagement. And then, so a couple of things that we're looking at, we want to really focus on the value again of engagement. We want to reinforce why engagement is so important, why it's so valuable, and then looking at our engagement data, right? So a lot of organizations out there will do employee engagement surveys. Hopefully your organization does some level of employee engagement survey on no less frequently than an annual basis. Hopefully it's a little more frequently than that. But what I really like to encourage organizations to do is, when you have that engagement data, make sure that you're truly unpacking that data to get the story of your organization. When I say that, I mean going beyond that top level data, going beyond that, just that top line that says, hey, as an organization, here is how we feel, because that generally reflects a positive or generally positive outlook. But I want to challenge you to also look at the subsets of the organization. Look at the different populations within your company, especially if you're capturing this data, capturing some of the demographic data as you're having individuals respond to the survey. But the better that you can do about understanding the different experiences that individual groups or different populations within your organization are having, the better you can understand that, the better that you can really start to unpack, how can we make sure that everyone is having a similar experience? And if there are some individuals or some groups, some populations that are having a disparate experience than our other population or some of our other team member groups, we want to figure out where those disconnects are and what can we do to address those. So that's part of this this module as well. Okay, and then finally, this capstone project, and this is which each individual will do. So it's going to pull together all those reflection exercises, and they're going to put together an inclusion and engagement team charter document. So the purpose of this is really to take those intentional actions to focus on what can we do, and how can we spell it out, and how can we all come to agreement on how we are going to behave, how we're going to operate, how we're going to hold each other accountable, how we're going to really make sure that in everything that we do, that we have that culture of inclusion and that climate that is thriving here at our workplace, right? So again, these are those key elements that we talked about earlier, and these are customizable for your organization if you'd like to tweak those. That's something that we can certainly edit, work with a curriculum designer to make those quick changes and quick edits. That's not a problem at all. As well as some of the inclusive leadership principles that are going to take us through this process, right? So that's kind of start our question and thought processes around this. And then we start to put together our charter document, and it's going to ask us specific questions that are going to really help us build this out. And this is something that leaders will do with their teams, and they'll walk through all of these different parts. They're going to enter in their answers as they're working through it as a team. And then ultimately at the end, you will have your overall document that spells out your team charter. So that's the course. That is the overview of the course itself. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. So this is the course that I wanted to demonstrate for you all. And again, I'm open to any questions that you may have. We pop over to LinkedIn, see if there's any questions there. I'm not seeing any questions there right now, but what I really want to encourage you to do is, if you have questions, if you have something else that you would like to see on this, if you want to get a more specific demo with your organization, or if there's someone else who you think really would get value from seeing this demo, please reach out to me, John at thewinnersedgecoaching.com, or you can visit my website, www.thewinnersedgecoaching.com, and you can schedule an appointment with me. Be more than happy to spend a little bit of time with you, kind of talk through it, learn what your goals are, understand what some of the things that your organization that you're trying to accomplish, and just really look forward to learning more. Again, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate that. I know you have a lot to do, and carving out 30 or 40 minutes out of your day is just something that I really appreciate you being able to take the time to do today. So until we talk again, have a great rest of your day, and we will see you on the other side.